All right, Jake Rieke, thank you for joining me on the Personal Success Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Who is Jake and what is his mission?
Oh man, Jake is someone well, let me just start with my personal mantra, which is just to never stop growing. So that's the mantra that I came to a few years ago where it felt like I did actually stop growing. So the Jake that was once, that we once knew, 20, 30 years ago is no longer exists. Like that we've grown way past that person through another person, and out came this person that I am today. So I don't even know how to exactly describe what Jake is, or who I am. And I've never been put on the spot quite like that. So.
Well, I thank you for, very, very gracefully accepting that, but I sort of hear, you're this person who's always, change is, it's kind of funny because there is sort of an implication. Change is always happening, right? I mean, we sort of have this normalcy bias where we think we get to a spot once we get here, but things are always changing. We're always, kind of flowing. And it sounds like almost as if you're saying you sort of have sort of internalized that and you're just always growing and just kind of going with the change.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I think back on the person I was in college, I don't even know if I would want to have a conversation with that person. And I'm talking about myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is kind of sad, just so much I didn't know back then, so many experiences I needed to have, so much I needed to learn. And it is, I guess I've always thought of it was kind of an oxymoron. If somebody came right out of graduate school and became like a 25-year-old psychiatrist or psychologist, I always thought
yeah,
it's almost like you just need that life experience to get through it. You just experience teaches everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you and your wife are from Minnesota and you were farmers.
Yeah.
And so this was a family farm that you guys had, right?
Yeah. The farming operation, it was a big conventional Midwestern farm. We had 900 acres of corn and soybeans. I ran 7,000 hogs across 2 different sites. And you might think that would take a huge crew or a lot of employees, but it really wasn't. It was a very small crew. It was myself and my dad and my wife and one other hired hand. And then we would pull in contractors, but that's largely all that it took to run an operation of that size.
I can imagine that it being a family farm, there's some pressure there to kind of, have to take over the farm or whatnot, right? I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, it was one of those experiences where looking back on it, now with a little bit of distance, because we obviously moved on from the family farm. We've left the farm since, but looking back on it, it almost feels a little bit cultish in nature. Because the cultural pressures that you're under to step into those roles of Midwestern conventional farmer are so powerful. They're powerful in a way that you can't even, they're so much more powerful, but because you can't see them, they're at a subconscious level until you actually have that time to look back on it and process what you went through. When we started farming there, my wife and I, we just wanted to be the best. We wanted to prove our family that we were worth it, that we were worthy of taking over this legacy, this family, this generational farm. And so it kind of, this vacuum that we got kind of sucked into kind of turned us into different people that ultimately when we look back on it, we didn't want to be those people. And it's not to say that we were bad people or anything like that. It was just the lifestyle was so demanding. The limiting beliefs were so profound in that they went back many generations, right? This was a very old farm. This was a 150-year-old farm. And so these limiting beliefs about what a farmer is, about what it means to live in the Midwest, what it means to do this job were just really profound, meaning they were just really evasive, really all encompassing. And some of them being the farmer you never hire anybody to do anything. You do everything yourself. And so that was one of the beliefs that just kind of kept you stuck. And so when my wife and I hit this midlife crisis between ages 40 and 43, it was time to take over the farm. It was time to really take a hard look at what we were doing in our lives. And when we took a solid look at it, we were miserable because we were just working so hard all the time. I never got to spend time with my kids, and the health implications that lifestyle had on me was, I was overweight, I was pre-diabetic, I never worked out, or it didn't, everything revolved around the farm.
I think that part of the story is a lot of people's story. They even get to the part where they're aware that something is wrong. Something is like, I'm unhealthy. I don't get to spend time with my family. I know that these things, these sort of beliefs that are driving everything aren't necessarily true, but your story's different. I mean, you're in Costa Rica now, right? And this wasn't that long ago. So
Exactly.
There's a pretty interesting story in the middle here, right? Of how you get to this awareness, which I think a lot of people that are listening to this right now are probably going to be like, wow, I see some of that in me, in my family, or someone, who's close to me. What is that story? What caused you guys? You saw this, you noticed it, but like I said, even the people who might be listening, they're like, they might notice this too. What made you guys different to take action on it?
I think at the end of the day, it was like the frog boiling in the pot, right? Like we didn't realize we were boiling until the water was just boiling over the pot, and like we just had to change everything. And so like once you open up this little sliver of questioning your belief system, questioning your daily routine, it just kind of opened up this huge chasm where you started questioning all the beliefs all at once. And then it just created this cascading event of change and rapid change over a period of probably, about 2 to 3 years. Like I think our change started, and then it just snowballed. And I think we were so tired of the people that we were that it came that much more naturally. So yeah, like we were just like, there was just all this pent up energy of being sick of and tired of who we were. And it just created this snowball effect that just pushed us out and beyond into the next thing.
You and your wife, Kylie, wrote this book, A More Brilliant Life, which just came out in September. And so when you think of that phrase, like a more brilliant life now, what scene of your life comes to your mind first?
Really, when I think of a more brilliant life, I just think of always embracing change and personal growth and development. So that's what comes to my mind, is like just never giving up. Because I've seen people, and this is one of the cautionary tales, I think I've seen older generations where they've given up on losing weight, or they've given up on whatever it was that they believed in their life. And it's just kind of evident that they've reached their end. And I never want to see that in any other human out there. I want people to constantly be learning, and it doesn't have to be learning in a book. It can be occupational learning. It can be, I don't know, just doing yoga or learning a new skill or whatever it is. That's something that, yeah, I mean, I think it's built into the human experience. And when that growth stops, it exudes itself in your health, in your mental health, in the way that you go about your day and the way that people perceive you. I think it really just shows up in every area of your life.
So first of all, I should have asked this question earlier, but how did Costa Rica end up where you guys, I mean, Minnesota to Costa Rica? Now, I've never been to Costa Rica, but I just wonder how one ends up there.
I think number one, we were just hungry for adventure. We were hungry for another intercultural experience. But my wife and I actually, before the farm, we served 2 years in the Peace Corps in El Salvador. So we got introduced to Central America via El Salvador, learned the Spanish language, more or less. And, and then we wanted that experience for our 2 young daughters, 11 and 13 years old. And we were just at that place in our lives where we had to decide, like, what's next? And so when we sat around and kind of thought it all over, we're like, well, all right, well, we'll move here, we'll work there, we'll get this job, or we'll do that or whatever. And then maybe someday when we're older, we can move to Costa Rica and live down there. And then, the more we tried to play out all these other scenarios in our minds, the more we were like, wait a second, Costa Rica is available to us now. There's actually nothing stopping us. from moving down there in this moment. And that's what we ended up doing. And we love it down here. I mean, it's, the weather's amazing, obviously, but it's just, that was one of the things that we fell in love with in El Salvador was there's always this blurred line between inside and outside. So like we live in this place that had these big wide patio doors that you can open up. And so you always kind of are feeling that outside air coming through the building and through the apartment.
I love that I don't know if this is just a funny coincidence or what, but I know exactly what you mean by the division between inside and outside. I cannot remember. It was an Airbnb, I think, in Southern California that I stayed in once. And there was a huge porch with like, what would be, from a Midwest point of view, it looked like about 7 sliding glass doors that would open up and they were all open. They're all like screens. Right. And I'm like, I had that experience of like, wow, this is beautiful. I mean, it was right on the ocean. So you're seeing you got the ocean breeze blowing in, but I think the thing that I really understood from that was, there's not a barrier between inside and outside. And that did something.
Yeah. And when we were in Minnesota, we were just so tired of always being sealed up inside a house with the windows shut. There were just, and not to bash Minnesota climate, like there's plenty of people who love the 4 seasons and I see value in that too. But the reality is there's so few times when you can open the windows. It's either, like, it always felt like we were going from heat to air conditioning. And like, there was maybe 1 or 2 months in the year where it even made sense to open the window.
Yeah. In Cincinnati, it's the same thing. So, as a matter of fact, just before we got on this thing, I have over here set up because in my office, it's not insulated very well. I have both a fan and a heater. So we're in that part of the year, Jake, where, it's like the fan at night and the heater in the morning, right? That type of thing. Yeah. It sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'll just grab the web camera here and I'll give you a little view of what we've got in our apartment.
Yeah, please.
So it's rainy right now. Normally that's a mountain view.
Yeah.
But that's our deck. And then, it's super cloudy right now, but normally we can see quite a ways. And these are the patio doors that I'm talking about. I have them shut right now for recording this podcast. But this is our apartment here.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, it's expansive. It's open. Yeah. I love that. Even the inside, the vaulted ceilings and whatnot. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we love it too.
How did the book come to be? Is it like a, for those who aren't familiar with it, is it like, did it come from your guys' journey? Was it sort of, you started it and it kind of partially journals your journey? Or was it sort of a post hoc, like you look back and you're like, hey, let's share this?
No, it was just such a profound experience that we went through that it just started pouring out of us and we had to figure out a way it was just a cathartic experience for us to get it down on paper and get the story out. And so we wrote, I mean, it literally was, we literally wrote the book in the middle of our transition. It was transitioning away from our farming experience and into our next lives, into Costa Rica. And we wanted to get it down on paper while it was still fresh in our minds, while the emotions were still real and we could still feel it all. And so we really struggled with whose voice to use in the book because it's telling our story. It's my wife and I, the experience that we went through together. And we went back and forth between, do we shift between Kylie talking and me talking? Do we try and do like a joint, like us voice? And ultimately we just decided that it would flow so much better if we wrote the book from Kylie's point of view, and with her voice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you want people to use this book? Is it read through it? Is it a workbook or is it like a bedside companion? What do you think?
We want it to be inspirational. I mean, we want people to know that you can do it. You can get out of your stuck life. You don't have to stay where you are. You are not predestined to whatever your current situation is for the rest of your life. And so that's what it is. It was the first part of the book is really telling our story in terms of the misery and the limiting beliefs that we were experiencing, and just kind of a lot of the hurdles and stuff that we were bumping up against. And the second half of the book is what we did, all the steps that we took to to transition, to take ownership in our lives and transition into something different, something more in line with the people that we are.
Early in the book, you talk about living under expectations. We talked about this a little bit, but inherited roles and norms. And so if we were sitting next to the old you on like a normal Tuesday back then, what was it like in those days for you?
I would say I was just a very distracted person. Like I was always thinking about work. My mind was always on something else, especially when you're dealing with livestock. You're responsible for a huge amount of animal lives, right? And so there were alarms that would go off if the environmental conditions were not quite right, and they would go off in the middle of the night. I was basically always on call, and so if anything went wrong with the hog barns, I had to get out there quickly. And the reality is when you're talking about a Midwestern farm with it was a confinement barn, and if the power goes out there, you could actually end up suffocating those animals within like an hour. And it's very real in terms of like you have to be available for those livestock. So then on top of that, I'm managing, this cropping operation. When you're a farmer, you're not just one thing. You are the CEO and the janitor, all the way in between, the CFO. And, until you get into those really big operations that are like 30,000 acres, then you're dealing with more of a team. But our size farm is a very typical Midwestern farm. And that's how we did it. We did everything ourselves.
Wow. So what was it like for you personally, Jake, to sort of have that transition? Because that idea of distraction comes up a lot here. You're like, I was distracted. I was never sort of where I was. Now I'm assuming based on what you're saying, that's different. So what is that transition like?
To be honest, I really think the first seed that needed to get planted is extreme ownership. I love that Jocko Willink book, Extreme Ownership. And he just distills it down in such basic language, just such an easy, fast read. And at the time, it just hit my hands at the perfect moment in my life, in my journey. And I think it had such a profound impact on me. Like, oh my God, like I am choosing this life. I am the one in control here of my behavior, of my actions, of my thoughts. And so that was really but to even back up further, I think so often, and this was certainly true of myself, we are hypnotized by YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, screens, Game of Thrones, Netflix. Like any time that you have this little inkling of, I feel kind of bad about my life, like all you got to do is turn around and turn on the TV and that inkling goes away. And then, oh, great, I can distract myself for 2 hours and now it's time for bed. So like, that's the one thing that people need to realize is like, you have to slow down your life and your thoughts enough in order to really see what's happening in your life and what you're doing to yourself. And that's hard to do. You can't. I mean, especially in this 9 to 5, you're go, the kids, soccer, music, whatever it is, every day. And so you're every minute of your day is taken up, and it's just pure distraction, pure hypnosis.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about, because the mind being somewhere else is something that's, I think for myself, I started with, like meditation and yoga. And I know that, I know Kylie's a yoga instructor, right?
She is.
And I mean, I think for me, that really what I got from that. And it's funny because I could draw a line back to a mentor that told me as a line cook when I was like 13 years old. He told me, he goes, listen, you need to slow down to go faster sometimes. And I remember thinking, what the heck does that mean? And that's like, I don't know, that reveals some sort of paradox there, right? Where I remember I have 2 little boys now that are 2.5, but before they were born, I would there's some days I would meditate for like an hour, and I'm like, wow, I'm like a hyperactive, like go person. But I'm like, something happens when you slow it down so much that you just all of a sudden can sort of feel what it's like to be in your life. I mean, I'm sort of saying this is like, I'm realizing it as I'm saying it, but it sounds like that's what you're sort of talking about. That's what this really shift was you were able to sort of experience your life more deeply. I don't know.
Yeah.
Tell me where I'm off.
You're 100%. Yeah, you just have to slow down. And that's kind of what happened to Kylie and I before we had moved to Costa Rica. And I think that was another one of the catalysts for just leaving the country and just starting. We were so ready to start afresh, because back in Minnesota, I was the chairman of a cooperative board that provided internet to the rural areas. So that was a part of my old roles. I was deeply involved in that project, and it took up a ton of time. There was other volunteer community organizations I was a part of, and then obviously I was running this farm, and Kylie was more or less managing the kids' schedules. Music was a big one. They performed in musicals and stuff like that. But at any rate, like, our schedule just got so full and so packed that we had reached this boiling point of like, oh my gosh, we have to just start with a clean slate. And you mentioned yoga, and actually one of the things that has happened to us recently in the past couple of weeks is we've really been getting into yin yoga, which is the version that, it's less of an exercise. It's more of a mental, it's more of a cross between meditation and yoga. So you're sitting in poses for, 3, 4, 5 minutes and really just letting everything that flows just flow, right? And so that's been our recent interest is yin yoga, and the condominium development that we live in here. The people really like yin yoga as well. It's very popular. Yeah.
I think it's funny because I remember my yoga instructor, she told me, because I loved yin too. And she's like, typically, people she said I had a lot of vata energy, meaning, it's kind of like all just, it's buzzing around all the time. And I'm like, yeah, it's so new to me to have to sit in like one place in one pose for 10 minutes, sometimes longer, that it's like, it's a clean slate. Like you said, I don't know. I really resonated with yin yoga too. That's awesome. You have a background in psychology and sociology, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, how has that influenced your path here?
I think I've just always, ever since I was a child, I've always been so curious in what drives behavior. What drives my behavior? What drives other people? And the mind has always just been such a mystery for me since the very beginning. And so I truly just went to college, not necessarily concerned about using my degree for a career. I didn't know farming was going to be a part of my life at that time when I went to college, but I literally just majored in those majors because I thought they were interesting, and I found that stuff super fascinating. And then at the time when I was going to school, I kind of knew the Peace Corps was going to be in there, so I wasn't too concerned. I was just like, we'll get a psych and soc degree, and I worked a little bit around the Twin Cities. As you do in your 20s, you just kind of, this is good. And then it was in our late 20s when we committed to the Peace Corps, and then that just changed the absolute course of my life. I mean, we loved El Salvador. We loved living in that environment. It was just so aligned with our purpose. And then it was when we were in this rural setting, just really slow pace of life, that we were like, hey, let's go back and let's run the family farm. And so, because to be honest, there was no other relatives, no other cousins that were interested in taking over this legacy. And I thought, this would be a great fit, right? I love country living. I love slow lifestyle. But the reality is we just got, I think, it was the frog boiling in the pot, in that, little by little, we just kept getting sucked in more and more into this lifestyle, and at the end of the day, it just turned back into capitalism, consumerism, more and more and more, grow until we finally reached a point where we have to change, or it's time to separate.
Yeah, wow. So over the course of this journey from really Minnesota to where you're at now in Costa Rica, how has your relationship with your children changed? How has your relationship between you and Kylie changed?
Kylie and I are very close. We're closer than we ever have been. And so let me just touch on that for a minute, because we talk about it a little bit in the book, but I think there was this moment where I was unhappy. I was unhealthy. I was way overweight. I had started to snore, and Kylie and I had started sleeping in different beds, in different rooms, and our marriage was just like I could just sense it. I could just sense that we were just drifting apart, and I could tell that our marriage was struggling. Like if we continued down those paths, I didn't know how many years we would have left together. And I think that was in part to it. Like it really was the, strength of our relationship, because we had been together. Kylie and I have been married since 2004. So we're going on 20 some years now. And so it was the strength of that relationship that also helped catalyze the change, because I could see it play out in my mind. She wasn't going to put up with this for the rest of her life. Both, the way that we were being treated on the farm, and just the fact that I was overworked and unhealthy and overweight and not supporting the family like I should be. So that, we had to drift apart, but at the end of the day, like we've come full circle and really recommitted to the relationship. And now, she and I work on this business together, the Brilliant Life Journey. We put the book out together. We want to help other people through their midlife crises or their midlife transitions, or as we like to call them, the midlife awakening. So our relationship, I feel like, is 10 out of 10, super, of course, everybody has their good days and bad days,
Sure.
but,
Yeah.
but it's better than it ever has been. As far as the relationship with the kids, I feel closer to them now because I'm seeing them every day. I literally drive them to school here in Costa Rica. I'm giving them hugs in the morning and in the evening, before bed. I'm way more involved in their mental state than I ever have been, before. And as far as the transition goes to Costa Rica, it's been a bit rocky for the 13-year-old, but it's gone a little bit better for the 11-year-old. Both of them are, after a year of being in Costa Rica, are understanding the language way better than I ever have. Like they're picking up the language like that because we enrolled them into a bilingual school here, and it's really just immersion. But yeah, so that's
such an awesome, hopeful story. I think some people, that's one of the things that happens, I think, in this sort of American life, or whatever you want to call it, right? Our relationships suffer, right? And so that's one of the things from you guys sort of taking extreme ownership of your lives. You've seen this dramatic change in your marriage. I think that's really inspirational.
Yeah. And the truth is, I've seen friends of ours where the husbands are sometimes just totally blindsided when the wife is like, oh, it's time to get a divorce. And you just want to be like, where are you? Where have you been in this relationship? Where have you been in the past 10 years of your marriage? Like, how could you not understand that your relationship is struggling? It's just, I think it's a testament to the power of the devices and the technology and the distraction that we all have, that so many husbands are just completely blindsided by their wife being like, it's time to part ways.
Yeah. And speaking of somebody who's lived through that one time, already, it was like, it wasn't really technology, it was work. But seriously, I was like, wait, what? Hold on a second here. But you talked about in the book, American Trance. And so what is the American Trance, and what does it look like to be caught up in it? Is that what we're talking about here with the technology, or is it more than that?
No, it's definitely more than that. I mean, you are a product of your environment, and you can't see the water that you're swimming in. You can't see your environment until you've stepped out of it. So that's why we had such a strong motivation to live internationally in this Costa Rican culture, to learn a new culture, because then when you look back on your American culture and your roots, you really can actually see it for what it is. But I think about this a lot, because of my experience, like stepping into this role on the family farm and like wanting to be such a I'm such a people pleaser. I know that about myself now. I don't think I fully acknowledged it back in my history, but I am. I am such a people, and I think that's a common trait for most of humanity. I think a lot of humans are true people pleasers. But the one thing I think about a lot, and I've heard like, I think Jordan Peterson has mentioned it, but other famous minds have talked about the fact that, like, if you grew up in Nazi Germany or whatever atrocity in the past, like in slavery, like if you were in that culture, odds are you're not going to be the Gandhi or the Martin Luther King that you think you would be in today's culture, right? Like, obviously we look back on these atrocities and we're like, oh my God, like how could you ever be a German soldier, right? But But the reality is if you were in that environment, you're swimming in the fishbowl and you can't see it. And all of us are susceptible to that. And I truly believe that because of my own experience, especially looking back on my experience in the fifth generation family farm, experiencing all of the intergenerational beliefs that get passed down, the way that my family members like saw how to do business. And then like, when my mind started to open up, it literally was like the Neo in the Matrix moment of like, wait a second, we can look at this all completely differently and we can still have a good life. We can still have, a life that we cherish, that we value. But at the end of the day, like it just was the ideas that we were trying to bring into the operation were just far too radical, and we just bumped up against that intergenerational belief system, and finally had to say, this is it, guys. We can't stay a part of this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I love that. Yeah. Oh, it does. Yeah. I love that analogy of, if you ask a fish, how's the water? They're like, what's
Right.
water? Type thing. Having been removed from sort of the American or Western culture, however you want to phrase it, what water do you see that maybe you didn't even when you started becoming aware of what was around you? Anything come to mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is I love the Chinese proverb about the horse and the good versus bad, where I'm sure you've heard it, but these wild horses arrive on this guy's farm, and all the neighbors say, "Oh, isn't that great?" And then the next day, the son of the farmer is trying to train one of these horses, and he gets bucked off, and he breaks his leg, and all the neighbors say, "Oh, isn't that awful?" And then the next day, the military comes and is trying to recruit people for the military, but he's not recruited because of his broken leg. And all the meanwhile, this farmer is saying, maybe, is that good or bad? I don't know. We don't know. And that is something that I truly have integrated into one of my core beliefs. Like, there is no such thing as good or bad. You cannot decide in the moment what is good or bad. And I think when I look back on the American culture, especially in the political divide that we're seeing right now, there's so many people that are just wrapped up into this. Like, that's awful. This is good. Like, I'm right. You're wrong. And it's just a debate that like is such a waste of energy. And, I don't know what to do about it. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with the way that, that humans interact. I mean, it's really just, all it is a mirror of us as humans or Americans, of our culture. And it's true across lots of cultures. But if there's one thing that I see, and it's not to say I don't see it here in Costa Rica too.
Sure.
We absolutely see it here as well.
Yeah.
But this conflict between right and wrong, good, bad, it's so, and people that, they build it into their identities. And that's when it gets really dangerous, is when you have something like that so built into your identity. Like it's then you're just like, you're lost and you're part of the cult.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's so I can hear a couple of things of what you're saying. I wonder, like, what do you call that? Is that, because it is like is that the inability to disagree, like in a civilized way? One of the things this is just a thought that I've had about, I don't talk about politics on here, but just, I do talk about human solutions. Like, what is success? And it's really difficult. And it's gotten increasingly difficult in my life to have a conversation with someone who believes something different than you do. Mm-hmm. And to the point where I actually challenge myself when I see that I start feeling that like push, like, oh, this person, I like lean in a little bit. Because I'm like, that's what humanity needs. So maybe somebody will see that. And I just bring that into this conversation here because I think that you're talking about meaning making, or I'm not sure what's coming up for you as I bring that up.
I mean, I think what fascinates me the most is human perspective and like how the mental gymnastics that has to take place for people to get so hardline in whatever position they happen to be in. And it's not that I'm saying that one side is right or wrong either. It's just that I think what fascinates me is like, what is it that's happening underneath? And the reality is like, it's that person's human experience. If the guy's 40 years old, he's got 40 years of experience that's crafting that perspective.
Yeah.
And so like who's for anybody to say that his perspective is more right or wrong than anybody else's? It's just what is pouring out of that person at that time in that moment.
So in the book, you have a framework: contemplate, investigate, activate, eliminate, accelerate, and navigate. So what is this framework for? And can you walk us through it?
Yeah, absolutely. Contemplate is like what I talked about earlier, just in that like you have to slow down enough to really take the full assessment on your life. You have to shut the screens off. You got to slow down on the scrolling. You really got to make time, you know, whatever it is, meditation, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, just really quieting the outside world. That's step one. And so like once you've done that, then you can start taking stock as to like, okay, once I quiet this all down, like what's actually going on inside me? Because you never really will uncover those layers unless you do slow down and start to quiet the outside world. And then once those layers start to surface, that's when you can move on to investigate and just start like peering in to what is it that's surfacing. And then after you know what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, then you just take action. That's where the activate step comes in. And then once, so I'm kind of flying through all these,
Right.
but once you start to activate, then so often in order to create the life that you want, you do have to eliminate what's not working. You got to get rid of the relationships, the people, the habits, the beliefs. It's as much about eliminating as it is about addition, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and just once you've got that framework built, accelerate. That's the step number 5. Accelerate, put all that into action, and really just let your wings soar. Yeah, and take off. And then finally, we added that last one, the navigate, because the reality is like once you make all these changes in your lives, you're never done. There's never a moment where you're like, okay, I'm cooked now.
Yeah.
I'm enlightened. I'm the full human, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. So you just have to navigate the path in front of you and the path that you want how you want your life to unfold.
Yeah. So just to kind of dig into a couple of those, you know, for you, Jake, what did it look like in your busy life when you're on the farm when you began this contemplation stage?
It looked like I could just tell that I wasn't happy, especially when we look back at the photos of even like me being on vacation. Like we went to vacation in New York and I look back on those photos and you can just see it behind my eyes. So I think the way that it initially started to unfold is just accepting the fact that this life was not serving me. I was not happy in this life. I was miserable. And so there was a period where I actually tried some therapy. I tried for help, but you know, I'm somebody with a degree in psychology. So like, obviously if there's anybody that's going to believe in how effective a therapy can be, it should be me. Right. But the reality is I was not impressed with therapy in general. I'm not talking bad about BetterHelp. I know they do great things. But therapy just didn't do much for me because at the root, at its core was the life I was living. And I feel like that is what needed to change more than anything else. It wasn't this, you know, when I look back on it, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I was so depressed and all of these signs just kept coming at me over and over and over again that I'm unhappy. You know, our relationship was troubling. I didn't feel like I had a very strong relationship with my kids, with my family. We were doing just fine, like financially, and never had to worry about money or health insurance or any of that. But the reality was, it was just eating me up from the inside out. So those were the first signs, I think, that got me to actually start to take action. And so you do kind of have to reframe that belief and say, this depression is a blessing and not a curse.
What is one belief that you uncovered in this process that shocked you how deep it ran for you?
Oh man. Yeah, I think a friend of mine who's about the same age is also a farmer. I'm still in contact with him. He's a very good, he's a true friend. He and I kind of went into this midlife crisis roughly the same time period. And so he was putting these lovely bugs in my ear about, I don't know, I think it was like what's the book? Like Who Not How. That was one of the books. The just a ton of books that I started reading early on just to try and understand a new frame of thinking. And so like it shocked me that it had never occurred to me before that like a business of this size is capable of hiring work out to people. Like we started hiring the lawn mowing to like 15-year-old neighbor next door who just loved running that giant lawn mowing machine, lawnmower. And like, it shocked me, like, why on earth did we do this ourselves? Why did we spend 3-4 hours every week mowing the lawn when you can hire the neighbor's kid for $20-$30? Like they do it for so cheap. And so that was one of the beliefs that like the who not hows type mentality that we started to uncover. Like you don't have to be everything all at once. You don't have to be the CEO and the janitor. You can, in fact, draw people in for help.
Eliminate is a big word. And I wonder for you, what was something that you needed to let go of that you once thought, I could never live without this?
Well, just safety and security. That's one of the hardest things that I think people encounter, especially when you're leaving just this, maybe you got $100,000 a year job, and they've got $200,000 a year job, whatever it is. And they've got great health benefits. They've got the 401k, everything, but the job is just making you like hollow inside. And so, yeah, that's one of the hardest things to leave behind is that security net, the safety net.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that probably is, at least when people are initially like, when they put themselves in your shoes, that might be like the first thing I consider. Well, why would, why I can't do that because of this, So, one of the things I think is most notable about the book is that you and your wife did this as a partnership. You like went on this path as a partnership. And I wonder, it sounds like that has ultimately been rewarding, the fact that you said that it's never been better. Right. But I wonder what was a hard conversation that you guys had in this story that, I don't know, that was a hurdle for you?
Yeah. I mean, but some of our hardest conversations were early on in the process where, we were bumping up against gender roles in the family farm. In this 150-year-old farming operation, like obviously the man is the one that makes the decisions and the wife is just the one that makes the food and takes care of the kids, right? And so that was a major conflict for us initially. And I just had to get over this belief, these core beliefs in that like her opinion matters. And actually not only does it matter, but it's actually very valuable. My wife is an incredibly intelligent person and has a great perspective. And we were actually far more powerful thinking these issues through together than I was trying to do it on my own. And I remember one of our early meetings when we were trying to figure out how to navigate our exit from the farming operation. We were meeting with a lawyer friend of mine. He was actually just doing it pro bono. He was helping us out, and he was like, he sat down and he said, "We're not just trying to figure out how to buy out your other family members. We're trying to figure out how to buy out your parents as well, right? Because my parents are actually retirement age." And like that had never, and it was kind of one of those conversations where it just shocked me to the core. It's like it had never occurred to me that not only do we have to figure out how to exit, from one side of the corporation, but we also have to figure out how to exit my parents. And Kylie, my wife, was just like, "How many times have I been told you that? But you haven't heard it from me, but you listened to your lawyer friend." And so that was one of those moments where like, okay, I owe you an apology. You were absolutely right. And it's true. She's been saying that for a long time. She'd been saying you can't just think about one half of the equation. You also have to think about your parents. And it didn't really sink in until I'd heard it from a third party. And that was my bad. That was something I had to own up to.
I just want to take a moment and I want to speak to the power of the book, because it really is quite an amazing story that you guys really have.
We really just take everybody on a case-by-case basis. Largely, we're looking for people who want to make a major change in their lives. So in order to do that, you really do have to uncover those limiting beliefs. And that sometimes takes time. That takes a relationship to develop with your clientele and with your clients. And so that's really the first step, is just getting to know the the person understanding their situation, understanding where they want to be and what's getting in their way. And so often, myself included, there are these subconscious beliefs that are lurking underneath that are keeping you from doing the work. They are keeping you from being the person that you want to be because they're happening in the programming underneath and you don't even know they're there. So that's a large part of the journey is a self-discovery. And then it really turns into accountability and like, okay, now let's stay on track here. Let's stay focused. Let's stay consistent and keep plugging away at the.
So where could somebody who's listening right now online, where could they connect with you online or a website or?
Yeah, we've got Brilliant Life Journey is our brand. So it's brilliantlifejourney.com. We've also got YouTube. We've got A More Brilliant Life. Our book is on Amazon. I host my own podcast where I talk to people about their life transitions, about their major pivots, about their career changes, or even international relocation. And the podcast is the same name as the book, A More Brilliant Life.
As we get close to the end of our time, what is a question about your story that maybe almost nobody asks you that maybe they should?
I haven't shared this directly with you, Ryan, but probably just asking about what it feels like to go through a family conflict at the size that we did. And, I think that's a conversation that's really valuable for all of us to hear because no matter how big or how small the estate is, money is always a dividing factor. And so it could just be, like grandma's lake house or whatever that just ends up just destroying a family. And I think people need to really think through how they handle themselves in those moments, really think through what they're okay with giving up in their family dynamics. And are they going to be okay with it for the rest of their lives? Or is it going to be a lifelong regret? And so I think that's something that's an incredibly valuable conversation to put out there. And it's not easy because the emotions are so profound. We went through some of the strongest emotions I've ever experienced in my entire life, just a roller coaster up and down. And you have to be able to disconnect yourself from that energy somehow in order to really think rationally, which is easier said than done.
It's a fascinating story that you guys have, and it's a fascinating book. There's sort of a revolution happening on some degree, and you're evidence of that, Jake, is that people are just like, wait a second, I don't have to run the family farm. I don't have to get the 9 to 5. I can go to Costa Rica. And I don't want to normalize, or take away anything that's about your journey, but I mean, it's like, it's possible. And, I think there's something profound that we learn about ourselves in those journeys. And I think this book and your and Kylie's work is really, really helping people find that. So I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's great to get all of this out. I love talking about it. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Jake.